The featured author for this month's Meet the Author is Kerry Peresta. Kerry is a repeat visitor at this event, and this time she's bringing us the third installment of her Olivia Callahan suspense series. Kerry, you're here about the book, The Torching. What can a reader expect from that book?
Oh, well, what the reader can expect is when they pick it up, they should expect to be exhilarated because it's an adventure. But after they read it, they should expect to be inspired. I like to put profundity in my books, kind of rolling along in the background with all the dangerous things and the thrilling things that are happening. So I like to give them food for thought. So I'd like them to be sad that it's over. I have had people go back and start from the beginning again, which is awesome. But I'd like them to think about their lives. I like people to kind of overlay the story on their own lives and be encouraged and inspired.
Now, full disclosure, I'm a reader of all three of those books sitting there.
Thank you.
So this is the third installment in your series, the Olivia Callahan Suspense series.
Yes.
Now, for new readers who may be picking up the book today, can you give us a little backstory about Olivia Callahan's story? Because it's fabulous.
Sure. Thank you so much. Olivia Callahan is a woman who was married. She married young. She married a man that was a controller, but she really didn't realize he was. So she was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years with this man, raised two lovely children. And one day, her husband calls her and says, "Let's go out." And she's so excited, she gets all dressed up. And so they go out to dinner, and he announces to her that he's met someone and that he wants a divorce. She had no idea. She is completely blindsided. And why do men do that anyway? A phone call would suffice. Don't take her out to dinner and make her dress up. But anyway, what happens is that she makes a series of terrible decisions. And one of those decisions ends up with her in the bushes outside an ER with a head injury, bleeding out. She is discovered in the bushes and admitted as a Jane Doe. And they find that she has a traumatic brain injury. She is not expected to survive. But they work hard on her and she survives, and she lapses into a coma. She is not expected to live, but she does awaken, and when she comes to, she hears the medical personnel talking over her, talking about how she looks and it's so pretty, she's so pretty, and it's such a shame that she may not make it, and how could this happen, and who is she? They can't find fingerprints in the database or anything. And so she can hear all of this. But then she realizes she can't move, she can't speak. She can't remember her name. She can't remember her past. And my books are the story of Olivia's journey to rediscover herself physically, to travel back into her past to retrieve her memories that the brain injury stole, and also to try to move forward as a new person. Because, to complicate matters, the brain injury has flipped her personality completely upside down. So now she's a different woman, and nobody knows what to do with her.
Now, you have packed a lot into this last book. Okay.
Yes.
You know, she's still dealing with the brain trauma. She's trying to reinvent herself, so she even goes through a personal makeover, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then you give her, you know, again, relationship issues. You give her family history drama. And you threw in a little pyromania. Okay. So I want to know, as a writer, what of all those plot points was the most and least enjoyable for you to research and develop?
Okay. I'm not sure where the fire aspect hit me, but I just thought it would be very interesting to play on that as a metaphor. And but I needed to be authentic with the arson. I didn't know much about firefighters, and I still pictured them in big black boots and rubber things, and I had no idea. So I had a friend from church. Her husband is a career firefighter, and so he agreed to sit down with me. That was one of the most enjoyable things, was finding out how they sit in a fire engine denotes rank, for one thing.
You scared me there for a minute. I thought you were going to say the most enjoyable is learning how to set a fire. You had me going.
But I had to be authentic for the process of what they would do after the fire was set. I also had to be authentic for the process of what a fire chief, where he would come into the whole mix. Because if you remember, it was announced at a high school graduation. Mm-hmm. And the fire chief was the one who interrupted the graduation. So that was very enjoyable for me to find out about fire. And then I asked him about pyromaniacs. And pyromaniacs are very, very rare.
Good.
But they are very often affiliated as volunteer firefighters because they love fire.
Okay.
They love fire. So, but they differentiate between fire addiction, that's a thing also, and actual pyromania, which is a mental disturbance. So, but out of all of those, I enjoyed researching all of that. Makeover, I'm crazy about makeover, so I know all that stuff already. I didn't have to do any research on that. And I think the most difficult thing was family history. So, because we all go through difficult things in our families, right? And they're sad and it's traumatic to go back and try to just think about them and remember them and try to redeem them. And so as I unpack Olivia's journey and as she discovers the past trauma that she has experienced and her mother in the torching, I relive some of mine. So that is difficult to do. However, it makes it real authentic to put down on the page.
Now, having journeyed through the books with you,
yeah, thank you.
In this last book, it scared me a little because you've given her a lot more about her past, given her some closure. Is that storyline leading us to maybe the end of the Olivia Callahan?
Oh, no.
Okay, good.
There are 2 more books coming.
Oh, all right, good. Okay, that's good news because you cannot keep that woman down. You have put her through so much.
Yes.
And, as she's now going to be venturing in her new career, can you give us a preview of some of the adventures that this woman hasn't yet gone through and will be going through? Any big changes?
I am only 20,000 words into book 4, and most of my story happens underneath my hands. So what it will involve is she and Hunter will have lots of bumpy rides, continue the bumpy rides, and as her career progresses, she will have difficult things to untangle within that, and she is also going to confront a horrible thing that is happening to one of her close friends, which is complicated by the fact that it's Hannah. And so it's complicated by the fact that Hannah was involved a little while with her ex-husband who is in prison.
So now I remember that in The Rising. Okay,
yes.
All right, okay.
Yes.
Okay, now, one of the most poignant things I thought in this book was that beautiful relationship she has with her mentor, Tom Stark.
Yes.
And it's a pivotal part of that book, too. Did that come from an inspiration of a mentor you had, or have you mentored someone? Where did that come from?
I have been in so many groups where there were mentors, women groups, different recovery groups, different codependency things that I have been involved with. And so many women have mentored me in my life. I haven't had a man mentor me. I think that would be dangerous. But Olivia never had a father. Well, she doesn't know her father. So she is taking that journey. But I thought it would be wonderful for her to have a man in her life she could trust, because her father, I won't do any spoilers here, but something happened between the mother and the father, and she's going to discover all of that history. But she has always been betrayed by men, and what she has found out about Monty in her journey back to her past is so disappointingly tragic. And so she's never been able to really trust a man. And so I wanted a man to be in her life that was not physically attracted to her or romantically attracted to her, but would be a father figure / mentor. So that's where that came from.
It's a great character.
Thank you. I love him.
Okay. Now, enough about Olivia, even though I could talk about her for a long time. Your career. I understand you did a lot of article writing, short stories. So how did you make the leap to novelist?
Well, before I started writing, I was in advertising. And I did everything from copywriting to the art, creativity, to the account management, everything you can imagine. And I always was the go-to for copy. Everybody would, it was just easy for me. It was just like falling off a log. And so I started writing short stories. I actually had a humor column in South Dakota when we moved there. And I just liked it. And when I did sit down and write a book, I thought, how hard can it be? I wrote the worst first book in the history of first books, just so you know. So it was because I just felt like this was something that I wanted to do, that maybe I could do it well and tell some stories that were authentic and real. I did not give up on it, but I'll tell you what, it's a lot of work to learn the publishing industry and to learn how to do it correctly. I never wanted to self-publish. I never wanted to do all of that. I wanted to be with the publisher because I want my writing to be very vetted. I don't want it to just be me. I mean, it takes an army of people to take a book through all the stages and then to release. So I just dug in and did it.
Well, that leads me to questions, because in a group like this, you have aspiring authors.
Oh, good.
Okay, and you have, I think, mastered this suspense mystery genre.
Mastered is a strong word, but
I'm
thank you.
I'm going to use it.
Okay.
My word.
Lee Child,
Mastery.
take note.
What are the elements that you know in your head have to come out on paper for it to be a good suspense mystery novel? Because like you said, some people say, how hard can it be?
Mm-hmm.
What are they?
Interesting, because genre is something that I had to learn. Specific genres call for specific guidelines in what works for that genre, or it will not get picked up. It won't even get looked at by a publisher or an agent. Yes.
So are these published rules or hidden somewhere?
No, it's all
shared?
over online.
Okay. Oh.
Anybody can research that. There's a lot of research involved in learning all this stuff, but suspense demands action, action, action. It demands a flawed character that evolves. It demands cliffhangery endings, chapter endings. It demands a suspense twist at the end. In suspense, you kind of know who the bad guy is. And the deadening, Monty is a big fat jerk right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. However, there is this big unknown hovering in the background throughout the whole arc of the story. And there's just a question mark in your mind that something else is going on here. It's not just Monty being a dirtbag. There's something else going on with this whole dynamic. So that big unknown in the background comes to fruition at the end. All the threads get tied up together, but there's a twist that you don't see coming in suspense.
Okay.
And that's what makes good suspense, those elements.
Now, one final question before your presentation. I did some research and read, and maybe this isn't true, so you'll have to verify this, that you actually name some of your book characters from a list of baby names that you put together, but haven't used all of them. You use some of them, but you've now used the leftovers for some of your characters. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely true. I thought it was a wonderful redemption of names I was not allowed to use. Because in a couple of them, my husband just overruled me. Rat.
Show him.
Yeah.
I'll write a book.
Olivia is one of my favorite
Okay.
names of all time. So she is definitely
I was hoping.
one of my baby names. And then in my new book, Back Before Dawn, Isabel was another one of my names. So she is named Isabel. Lillian was one that I really liked. I love flower names. So Lily, and Olivia's one of Olivia's kids, is named after a baby name. And yes, I will use more of them. But those are the ones in my books that I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, I have to say, it's always a pleasure to get in the mind of all of you creative authors that come to visit for Meet the Author, and you're one of my favorites. Thank you. Now on to your presentation.
Well, what I'd like to do, what I usually do, is take the top questions that I've had before in all of my author events. By now, I've been through so many author events, wonderful events, but there are some questions that always pop up. At the end, there's going to be room for questions, so just keep in mind what you'd like to ask. But my number one top question always is, how did I become a writer? So I'll start with that one. Is that okay? All right, good. Head nods are good. It all started in 2008. That was the year I got remarried. My 4 kids were finally out of the home. I retired from an advertising career, and my new husband's job took us to South Dakota. Don't groan. We asked our pastor, do you think we ought to do this? Because this job moved him, and he said, you could do anything for 2 years. And so with that sage advice, we went to South Dakota. But it was wonderful. We lived in Dances with Wolves country. So what better place to think about reinventing myself? I wasn't having to make a paycheck anymore. My husband was busy with his new job. There were wide open spaces, and I have never in my life seen a moon as big as the South Dakota moon. Have you been to South Dakota? She's nodding her head back there. I've never seen anything like it. So there were some fabulous things about South Dakota. So what happened there, I had always been the go-to for copywriting in my 30-year advertising career. And so I had time to think about it, and I thought, well, I was always kind of good at that, and let me just take a shot. So I decided to tiptoe in, and they had a real active daily newspaper in Pierre, South Dakota. I lived in the capital. And so I wrote a letter to the editor. It got published. You would think I had won a Pulitzer Prize. I was so excited about that. And my heart was racing, and I was like, all right, there has got to be something here. So I decided to pursue that. And strangely, or serendipitously, the editor and I struck up a relationship, and he asked me to do a humor column when I lived there. And I thought, that is fantastic. So for 2 years, I did an 800-word humor column with a headshot right in the middle of the editorial page for Pierre, South Dakota. And that is when it just totally took over. I had the fever. I wanted to be a writer. That was all there was to it. So I sat down and I wrote a book. I wrote a book from start to finish. And I thought, done. It's the worst book on the planet. And it's still sailing around out there on Amazon. Do not buy it. And the turning point occurred when I hired an editor. A professional editor, a good one, is worth their weight in gold. Do we have any writers in here? Aspiring writers or published writers? Editor. Besides Brian? Yes, all right. Well, you know, then, an editor is so important. And I didn't want to spend money, quite frankly. Because a good editor is really expensive, but I did. And 18 months I spent with this woman. And she was like a private creative writing instructor. And it was just fabulous. So I learned so much in that. That effort landed me a query. I queried several after that with this piece, and I finally got some traction with that book. and it got picked up. Now, I wrote this book, and it is this book right here. So I started writing that sucker in like 2010, 11, something like that. It was published in 2000. I finished it, and it was published in 2020. So that's how long it took for me to kind of get a handle and a grasp on how to do this. So it's quite the journey. So suspense gives you breadcrumbs along the way. So in suspense, you kind of know up front who the bad guy is. If you have a mystery, mysteries demand a murder. Usually starts out with a murder, and then the whole book is spent solving the riddle of who did the murder. Suspense is more like it might have a murder, it might not. It usually always has a crime. But it's spent more in figuring out why what happened. So that's why I love it, because I like to write evocative characters that are flawed, that are struggling with inner demons, and those inner demons and those voices that talk to them make them fall into just a big pit, and they get into horrible circumstances, and you're sitting there going, why did that happen to you? And so through the whole book, you think about this character, you're rooting for her for the whole book, and how she pulls herself out of that pit. I like the psychopathy of the protagonist, and I really love the psychopathy of the antagonist, the bad guy. Most authors will tell you that their favorite character to write is who, writers? The bad guy. They're just so much more interesting. One of my favorite writing quotes is by David Foster Wallace. He said, "Good fiction's job is to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable." Now let me say that again. Think about this. Good fiction's job is to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable. I love that. I love disturbing the comfortable. I like my books to just shake you out of your comfort zone just a little bit and make you think. I write with themes in mind for each book. For instance, The Deadening is about the deadening and the resurrection of a woman's soul who was in a dead marriage, but she didn't know it. The Rising is about rising from the ashes and clinging to a very different future in spite of great odds, which is what my character does. And so another top question is, what does an author's daily schedule look like? Well, I can only speak for me because every author is different. But I try to arrive at my desk and log into my latest work in progress by 9 a.m. My goal is to write 1,500 to 2,000 words per day. If I'm not interrupted by a husband stalking through the house trying to find his glasses, or kids, adult kids that have crisis and trauma. Because if that happens, I just drop everything and take care of that. In my genre, 80,000 words is a book. So in historicals, it's like 120 or something, usually, but 80,000. So what that means is that you write 90,000 words or so, and then edit out and polish all the parts, because the editing is where the real work comes in. At least that's what I think. For authors, marketing is 40% of their job. Did y'all know that? Did you realize that? Yeah, because it's the publishers, the big boys even, they no longer do that. They won't even look at you if you don't have a huge social media presence. And he's shaking his head back there. And so all of that, so I spent years just going to conferences and friending everybody I could think of to show a big media presence. So now it took me years to kind of build that up, but that's something that they require. So the big 5 publishers are Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, Hachette, HarperCollins, and Macmillan. And they're all getting pickier and pickier and pickier about what they're going to pick up. And it's certainly culture driven as well. So if something is out that year, you're just out of luck. They've got to have something that they know is going to sell. And also I've heard, I don't know if you've heard this, that they're trying to do away with hardcover books and just go to paperback and paid on demand because they don't want to warehouse them anymore. So it's getting harder for them to make money, and the bookstores are still struggling a little bit. But people are not giving up their physical books. There's 50% of people still love to hold a book in their hands, which I think is interesting. But hardcovers are now $30. So people are just like going, you know, why don't I just buy one of these? And who are my favorite authors is another one. I like Tess Gerritsen, Lee Child, Frida McFadden, Louise Jensen, Rachel Kane. Those are my favorite. So how am I doing on time? Am I good? I'm good? Okay. All right. So another one is, do you use real people in your stories, and how much of yourself do you put in your characters? My daughter bought me a sign that said, and I've got it up in my office, and it says, be careful or you'll end up in my novel. And that's so true, because if you sit down with an author and you notice them looking at you, but their mind is kind of somewhere else, we are thinking about how cute you are, what that little dimple in your cheek is doing, the little tuft that's coming out of your hair, the way you do your hands, or the cute way you say coffee or whatever, because we're looking to give our characters more depth. So we do use actual people in our books, and also it's very helpful. It's mostly a mishmash of people that we know, but it's very helpful to visualize someone when we're writing. That makes a big difference. So yes, we do. And how much of myself do I put in the book? Well, every author will tell you they can't help but put a lot of themselves in their books. Just different facets. It would be totally boring just to put myself in a whole book, because I don't think anybody has that much pride to think that they're worthy of an entire character, but unless it's a memoir. But facets of our character can't help but leak out and complete some of the characters. And I think that we don't even realize it at the time, but it's just part of who we are. I think we don't always do it on purpose, sometimes.